pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This brings us to our first public comment portion of the evening. It's on agenda items only. Please state your name, and you're limited to 3 minutes. So we'll move on to revisions and approval of agenda. Revisions. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Second. Roll call. Abbott.
Here. Blake.
Benson.
Same.
Brooks. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
McNamara.
Aye.
Moore. Aye. Simpson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Alright. Officer Rogers, do you want to go over the school grant, your school safety grant?
Well, good evening. So as the board's aware, we had the opportunity to apply for the school safety grant, which kind of led us into trying to get a emergency operations policy that meets the grant specifications. We did not currently have one that fit that. And the grant application had a requirement that the board had to approve their EOP past like a date in 2017, which we didn't have, at least that I could find. So the operations plan in itself doesn't really have a lot of new stuff that the board doesn't have in policy, or the schools don't have in policy, or Compliance One put something together over the summer. So it was a combination of kind of just drawing information into the plan that references those locations. So I'll send you guys a copy at some point. Basically, there's a signature page, some detail on how the EOP can be updated without board approval. For instance, if phone numbers change or if positions change. Who gets a copy? And the purpose is really to incorporate the EOP into existing plans where applicable within the city of Tecumseh, County, Illinois, State of Michigan as partners. Each body represented share joint responsibilities in the 5 phases of emergency management. So basically, this plan kind of rolls in indicating that if there was a disaster, whether it be man-made or natural, this plan will coincide with other plans. For instance, the emergency management plan for the county. It allows for them to utilize Tecumseh if need be. Let's say that there was something in Britain and they needed school resources from here, such as like building space and so forth and so on. And I'm sure a lot of that mutual aid stuff is in existence or would be allowed. So that's kind of what it draws in. Talks about how this plan or can be updated and altered at future dates. Really the only thing here, there's some annexes, and Mr. Brown had brought like the emergency shut-off procedure for utilities for so forth. So a lot of the contact numbers, it's not that big of a deal. There's 2 things that need to be voted on this plan to make it the district plan. And my understanding is that at some point in the near future, this plan may be updated by Compliance One, who did the emergency management guides for like the classrooms and so forth, because they actually do it and will probably make it a little bit neater than I have had time to do. And the second thing is There's a requirement that, or a suggestion that the school district have an emergency management liaison. And I had talked to Mr. Mills about it, and it seemed like a no-brainer that the SRO would kind of fill that spot just because of the background. And all it is a coordination between the district's emergency management and the county, or law enforcement resources or medical resources away. So that's the second piece that would have to be specified. Other than that, I'll answer any questions. The grant was completed, was signed off on by Lenawee County, by Mr. Mills, by the police chief, and the grant has been submitted and it's been accepted. Not like accepted, we've got the money, but they have received. So those are really the only two action items. It is to designate the EM spot, the liaison, whether that's the SRO or whomever you want to choose. The policy puts the SRO in there, but like I said, that can be updated. And then to adopt the plan itself.
Any questions?
Does this, you say emergency management, does this include like for active shooter training or something like that?
Yep, there's a piece in there that specifies, and it's not just active shooter, but that is a piece to it. You know, how much training, and the state already set some of those guidelines, like how many lockdown drills we have to have per year and so forth. And the district already does active shooter training, or any kind of aggressive nature in a building. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a shooter per se, all right? So the district kind of already has that, but yeah, the plan at some point will spell out, you know, when's that training going to occur. It also does have memorandums of understanding, which we talked about at the last board meeting. I'm under the impression that some of those are already in existence somewhere, and the only reason I say that, I haven't seen them, I've asked for them before, but Compliance One, in their documentation that they provided, outlines locations that have already been established, and I would assume, maybe that's a bad assumption, but my assumption would be that in order to have those places as designated locations for reunification, that some contact has been made. So that's what I'm led to believe, but I have not seen anything. The grant, the total for the grant was $242,000 and some change, is what the amount that we had put out there based on recommendations by Mr. Rhodes and the IT department and Mr. Brown. So
That's how much the grant would be?
they don't have to accept it in full, but that's the amount that was applied for, with
Okay.
a cap of $250,000.
Okay.
So they $50,000 per building with a cap of $250,000 per district,
50,000 per building?
per building.
And what would that go towards?
So what was placed in the document at this point were cameras and servers, so storage space, digital storage space. I think there was a total of 124 cameras that were laid out, with each building being designated X amount.
But we have cameras now, but not nearly what.
We have some,
Yeah, but not all
Uh,
buildings?
not in all the buildings, and definitely not as many as we'd like.
Right.
How many years is that? Is that just a one-time?
Well, you can apply for it, but there is a spot on the grant to say whether or not you've been a recipient before.
Okay.
So my guess is, I think there's a total of 24 million that the state hands out. So my guess is if you've received it before, your chances of getting it will be less likely the next year, but
Did we receive it before?
no, not to my knowledge.
Any other questions?
Does this go on the grant list with all the other grants?
Yes, it does.
Ms. Way has already been emailed, did the grant application, so she can put it in with the files that she manages.
Did we have this in the current budget?
No, this was not planned for.
Not part of the revision?
No, it was not part of the revision.
And there's no match to this, so it's a flat out. There was a portion where you could ask for a match, but we didn't go that route. So this would be absolutely,
So you can't, the
Free
money's
money.
strictly for surveillance?
yes.
Okay.
Now, I mean, there's a number of things you can apply for. That's just what was deemed a priority.
Right.
So for example,
and very quickly.
we have certain buildings where we just have an exterior camera that just points to the outside. You know, the intention is not to load the inside of the school with cameras, that's not the intention.
Right.
But like, for example, in the high school, we cover certain stairwells, because problems can tend to arise in stairwells. So we have a stairwell that we currently don't cover at this point in time. It's quite expensive to install because of the length of the cable run and everything else. And we also have some of the exterior buildings, exteriors of some of the other buildings that we'd like to be able to cover, you know, both front and back at
Right.
the same time. And that's primarily for safety reasons. So where we have an exterior door, where we
Yeah,
have
or
an
where
access,
there's a door.
where we have an access control, we'd like to actually have a camera where we have an exterior door.
Can that money be used for, like automatic door locks and stuff like that?
Not
Strictly?
this.
Not
Okay.
this, it's specifically.
With the
Oh,
specific, you have to itemize what you'll spend it on, and, you know, MSP can come in and obviously review
Okay.
I mean,
and
when
monitor
we,
this plan.
when we implemented they call it an HID access control system, I mean, they did a very good job in terms of picking the right doors and doing the survey for that, so that was done really well. It's the camera portion that's somewhat spotty in terms
Okay.
of.
Yeah, the more cameras, the better.
We'd like to be able
Wow.
to cover even some of the parking lots.
Right.
In order to ensure that, you know, there's no damage to cars or things like that, because that has happened from time to time.
And you look at Compass alone, that's 37 exterior doors roughly.
Correct.
So, kind of eat your cameras off.
Yes.
Chad, in reference to the memorandums of understanding with businesses for assembly of students afterwards.
Right.
You said that there's an indication, but we don't really have any hard documentation at this point, so you're going to continue tracking it down? Is that something you're undertaking still?
Tracking it down and getting those documents for approval and signature at some point. When we started the ALIS training, part of that is identifying locations where unification can occur. And by no means is it, if the documents aren't there, I don't think anybody would ever turn us away in that kind of need. The problem lies, you know, if you're going to use a church and something happens during the weekday, it's getting access to that building, make sure that building is structurally capable of handling the amount of people that would be influxed, whether there's restrooms. So I guess I don't think anybody would turn us away, but at some point we'll want to have some sort of access to those buildings in off times that we might have to utilize them. So I don't know, like I said, the documents were told to me that they're present. I have never seen them.
When you say unification, do you mean like a meeting point?
Yeah,
Okay,
kinda.
that's right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, let's say that
It's a big
something happened in a
disaster.
facility,
Right.
you know, the school and the students would be advised to go to X location,
Right.
where, you know, it can be controlled. The police already have foreknowledge of that location, so they provide security, hopefully at some point. And then, you know, we can have parents and media and arrange for busing and, you know, all that kind of
Right.
stuff, so.
I'd just like to make you guys aware, Chad did a lot of work in a small period of time, so I really appreciate the work you did.
Can we use any of this grant to offset some of the camera costs and server costs that we've already come up against?
That we've already incurred? Can we use it retroactively, or is it only from the point of?
I have to look into that, I don't have that answer.
Because we renewed that contract with the service company to service the camera, so.
Yeah, we brought them in order to look at that. Most of that work has been done, most of the cameras are repaired and up and
Okay.
running already. We didn't wait for the grant because of the security situation, so we've already done that.
From my knowledge, it's not retroactive, I'm not gonna reimburse you for what you've already done.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
But obviously, these cameras can be added to whatever maintenance agreement with whatever company it's on, so.
Okay, so tonight you needed us to approve, which the operating procedures you have right there.
Correct.
And
Is
the
anyone
liaison.
aware of the exact wording we used when we authorized him to act on the district's behalf in our last meeting to put this together? Are we going to need to add to that or further authorize him to move ahead to act on our behalf to get the memorandums of understanding paperwork and the rest of it together? Or are we covered? We're gonna have to, yep, okay, that's what I thought. And what else, you had one more thing you needed.
So, you guys already authorized me to approach businesses on your behalf at the last meeting. So, for the MOUs, Once those buildings say okay, and we actually have a document, I'll present that, because you'll have to approve those as a contract at some point. I think that might be a little bit early for that right now, because you did it at the last meeting.
Okay.
So that you have to establish that if you decide to have the SRO as your emergency management liaison with the county, that will be one item. The second item, I guess, would be the approving the plan itself. And then I guess thirdly is to approve the submission of the grant application. It's already been done. The deadline's tomorrow, so.
So there's three things. Okay.
I can't think of a better person to do the liaison position.
I don't think there's any question there. All right. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the,
Sorry, do you want
it's
We
down.
got the action item.
Okay, that's fine. So, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's position. And I just want to say a few words on this before we get started the discussion. Ryan has shown interest in the superintendent's position. He wants the job, and I feel that we're at a point right now where we can't go out and get someone to do what needs to be done here in the next few months, because we're kind of, I don't want to call it a crisis, but we need to make some serious decisions here in the next few months. And to start a superintendent search at this time is going to put us way behind the 8 ball, and I just don't think we're going to be able to make the necessary changes that we need to keep our schools going. Especially looking at the budget, the last meeting, the loss of students that we've had, we're going to be hitting into the fund equity. I think, personally, that we don't have time to sit around and wait. Ryan's more than got the qualifications. Right now, he's got his permit, working on his certification. Those are my thoughts, and start having a discussion about it.
So you're talking about just a temporary assignment as the superintendent, but we're not gonna go out and search right now, because it'd be ridiculous to go out and search right now,
Right.
because we haven't got established goals or vision,
Right.
and that stuff you need to know when you're looking for a superintendent. And having been through 3 of these searches before, they are a pain. So,
I would think it would be a 1-year contract, is what I would be thinking, to get ship righted and get it moving in the right direction, so, and then we go from there. So that's my thoughts.
and it's not uncommon in a search to have somebody else, lower level administrator running your district. And Little Run, the first time, I think, was a finance officer, no, it was the curriculum director, and both Little Run and Tecumseh, I think, we had the financial director when we were doing the searches. And they all did fine jobs, and these 2 gentlemen are doing a heck of a job of running this district.
And there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the schools, and I think we need to remove some of that uncertainty right now. I'm not saying we vote on it tonight or anything, I don't want to vote on it tonight, but I think we need to have a discussion about this, so. Okay. Yeah, counts, yeah, absolutely, discussion time.
I have been 2 searches for superintendents. I've served with 3 superintendents. And when meeting Mr. Rhodes on the first day, spending a few hours with him and finding out his background, I was greatly impressed with his background. He's a very intelligent man. His heart's in the right place. His heart's for children, students, and I think he'd be great for the job.
Griff, where does this put you? Are you by default back at the high school, or are you still involved in the superintendent team?
I will go wherever the district needs me. I do have work to do at the high school, like I probably should.
I have heard rumblings about missing leadership at the high school. To that end, would you still be willing to be a part of the superintendent team? If not then an assistant or advisor to the superintendent?
I would do whatever you guys need.
The reason I ask is, when Superintendent Coffin decided to resign, we filled that vacuum from inside, obviously, and Ryan was a perfect choice because of his business background. The school's a multi-million-dollar business, and it needs a business background to manage the business. You're in there because you have, I'm not gonna date you here, well, I'm not gonna say decades of experience, I'm just gonna say you have a lot of experience. Not gonna carve and date you, you just have a lot of experience as an administrator in schools and the workings of the educational side. And together, you two have done an outstanding job covering everything the school needs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I don't wanna see, I don't wanna move too quickly away from that team, because Ryan still has a lot he can learn from you in terms of the educational system, and you have a lot you can learn from him in the business systems. And I know that you guys are currently, your wheelhouses are coming closer together, but they're still separate, and I'm very comfortable with both of you as a team. Either one of you being thrown out into that stormy sea alone isn't a good, comfortable feeling for me. So that's why I'm asking, officially assistant, officially officially whatever the title is. Functionally, the important thing is you would be there as part of that team.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think something, you know, we've never had an assistant superintendent before. You know, and we need to have one, to be honest with you. Because there was no continuity when Kelly resigned, and, you know, who was next in charge?
There was no redundancy
Right.
in leadership.
Yeah. So it's something we definitely gotta be looking at, so.
I mean, technically, according to the plan, part of what we're required to do is to ensure that we have redundancy in positions. Chad spoke about that at the previous meeting. And since I've stepped into this role, all I've found is multiple single points of failure, where if one individual is gone, then we have a problem. And I don't think a school district should be held hostage to just one individual. And, I mean, my feedback quite clearly is, there's no way I could do this without the help of Griff Mills. I want to speak very clear about that. That's just a fact. I mean, yes, I do not have the same experience at all in K through 12. You know, teaching at a university level is one thing. In terms of running K through 12, that's something different. So from that standpoint, I mean, I see that as an absolute necessity.
But your organizational skills and your background and the way you can put things in a, you know, a spreadsheet so you can visualize it in a glance, I mean, with color. You're very good at that, and I appreciate that, analyzing everything and being.
I always try to boil things down to its simplest point. I always try to communicate in ways that everybody can follow and understand. Not everybody's going to agree. I don't expect that, but I try to communicate in such a way that we can all go in one direction as best as possible.
Well, and the data, I mean, we haven't been the best at gathering the data and keeping track of it, and we have a lot to boast about, that data could, you know, that could help us analyze where we're succeeding and where we're not, and,
I mean, there's always the soft side. I mean, I had this discussion today at West with teachers, and with the principal. You know, we talked about data is extremely important as an input into a decision, but there's also a qualitative
oh,
portion as well.
absolutely, yeah.
You know, so we have to make sure that we blend both sides.
Yeah,
of
you
that.
gotta have a combination of the two.
Right. I mean, from that standpoint, I feel extremely well supported by Mr. Mills. I think that, you know, his insight into things has been extremely helpful. I think we've learned a lot from each other over the last few weeks. I don't think that he would deny that, or maybe he might, I don't know. But I think we've actually learned quite a bit from each other.
Now, we had talked about having you guys until the end of the year, we kind of all talked that way. But it seems to me, I'm getting the impression that because there's uncertainty there, because you're both temporary, that maybe the cooperation or the trust or the,
There's a little instability and a little
yeah, it creates
uncertainty caused by
instability
their
that's
temporary.
stopping us from moving forward in a nice timely fashion.
Well, the question is in any organization, if you don't think that the leader is going to be there, why would you follow them? Because you have to, or because you want to? You know, the issue comes down to, we need to remove uncertainty in this district. You know, I tried to make it very clear on Monday, and I'll make it very clear again. We have until September of next year to make things function. If we don't do that, and if we don't have a very clear path forward, and we continue to lose students, we will have a serious problem financially. People cannot ignore that fact, and that is a fact. So we have to find a way to keep the students we have to find a way to bring students back, and we have to find a way to attract new students. That is our utmost priority. And we have to rebuild an organization that is divided. We have to rebuild trust with teachers, with indirect staff, with administrators. We have to rebuild trust with the community. They have to know who we are, what we're doing on the inside. You know, and those are the important things that I feel that we have to focus on. And if we don't focus on that, we will implode. And then we will start a downward cycle that will be very difficult to dig ourselves out of. You know, if everything were perfect and we were in a perfect world and things were running great and our student enrollment was up and everything was fine, I may not be the person, and most likely I'm not the person you want to turn to be the superintendent. But that's not the situation we face right now. And that's not the reality of our environment. The fact is, okay, I may not be the person you want when things are perfect, but I can tell you when things are the way they are right now, I'm the person that you want. Because it's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, bringing people together, making some very difficult decisions, which we are going to have to make. We cannot keep kicking that can down the road and saying we'll figure it out next month or the month after that. We're going to have to figure things out quickly. We need to have the right team. We need to have the right people. Those are all hard things that have to be done. You know, I can't do this by myself. It's not the Ryan Road show. It's not the Griff Mills show. It's not the school board show. We as an entire team have to find a way to come together, which includes administrators, the school board, our teachers, our parents, the community. People need to understand it is a dire situation. Now, how we got here, I don't really care. I don't want to talk about the past anymore. It doesn't mean anything to me. And I'm sorry if people want to sit there and focus on the past. But we can't go back in time. I don't think anybody's invented a time machine yet. We can focus on where we're at right now and where we're at today. And what I see in front of us, what I presented on Monday, the situation that we see in the schools, and we can't keep ignoring it, we have no choice but to move forward. And that's my viewpoint. Things were running perfect, and we had a great environment, and everything was fine, and we were stable financially. I would tell you, I'm not the right choice. That's not where we're at.
I would suggest that we possibly assign Mr. Rhodes as our acting superintendent for a year, and Mr. Mills is our assistant superintendent of curriculum for that year. Then we have the balance we need and the stability we have for the next year until we see if we can get this all pulled back together.
But really what we're talking about here isn't a change in the dynamic so much of the team. We're not talking about changing the function of the superintendent team. We're setting your titles in permanence for a year so it creates stability. That's what we're really doing. We're not changing how we're operating. Maybe a little bit if we need to get a high school leader back in there. He might shift a couple hours over. We'll give him 2-3 hours more a week at high school.
Jake is in the audience and he's doing a great job. Throw that out there.
Stand up, Jake.
Where is he?
He's got the hat on.
Oh, he's hiding under the hat.
But he's got the right hat on, so that's good.
Something else we'll have to, if we decide to go down this road, is we'll have to change the bylaws.
Yeah, well, we'll have to either amend policy 1220 or we have to suspend it for the purpose of taking the action, but it's a simple majority vote.
Does that meet what you were looking for, Mike? Like Kevin explained it?
Yes.
And how do you feel about that?
I'm good. I'll do whatever the district needs me to do. But honestly, I agree with Ryan. We need to get started.
Oh, I absolutely agree,
We
one
need to
hundred
get
percent.
moving forward.
The only thing I would correct on anything Ryan said was, we don't have until September. We have until June.
So,
I was trying to be a little more optimistic.
Well, I appreciate
I
that.
realize what's in front of us right now.
You wanted
And
2
we
hours.
did.
Yeah, I would like to sleep sometime
That's
tonight.
next year.
Okay.
I honestly, you guys kind of fell into this, and we couldn't have picked better people.
I agree.
I know there was a joke made about me bringing you lunch every Monday, but I really should be doing that.
I like tacos.
I wasn't joking.
I'm a huge taco fan.
Good to know.
Any other discussion?
I think it's great. I think, you guys have shown a lot of guts to step up to these roles and, put a lot of time into it. You've taken your beatings and you're moving forward. I don't think we have time to do anything other than what we're doing right now, and I think we're on the right path. I think this is the absolute wrong time to be looking for a superintendent. I think that, we need to make sure our path is clear before we even would consider looking for somebody. Because we need to make sure that person's vision shares ours. I don't want to get into a position where we find somebody that might be a great superintendent for one school, but not for us based on our vision. So it doesn't make sense to me today to even start that search. We don't have time to, take those resources out of what we're doing right now. So I think, to give the system some stability and give you guys a little more time to focus on what you need to focus on is exactly what we should be doing here.
It's also noteworthy that I recently looked into it, and there's 8, I think, other districts similar size to Tecumseh in budget who are also searching for superintendents, so,
Right now,
or at this moment.
It's a bad time of year to do it for superintendent.
We don't want anybody that doesn't have a job right now.
You don't want to have anybody who deserts your district right now to come to us.
Well, that's true too. I think we found the people for it.
Well, I've had a lot of interaction with you guys over the last month.
Sorry.
So, yeah, sorry about that. But I will say that both of you are doing an excellent job. Sometimes we play devil's advocate against one another, but that's good, and we've had some really good discussions. And we're growing from it, I can tell you that much. I mean, we need to have those kind of discussions to be able to grow and become better. And when we don't have those hard discussions, we're not gonna get better. And we've had a lot of those, and we've agreed to disagree sometimes, but you both just are getting the job done, and I just wanna thank you both tremendously for what you've been doing, so thank you.
We're on to action items.
Any more comments? No? Okay. All right, action items. We need to designate a liaison for the emergency operations plan, and I would,
I'll make that motion. Sorry.
well, but we need to,
We'll move to designate Chad Rogers as our liaison for the county.
All right, and I second.
There you go.
Roll call. Abbott.
Aye.
Benzing.
Aye.
Brooks. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
McNamara.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Simpson.
aye.
Motion carries.
Then I need a motion to adopt the emergency operations plan for Tecumseh Public Schools, presented by Officer Rogers.
I make a motion to adopt the emergency plan.
So move, or support something.
Second something.
Roll call. Abbott.
Aye.
Benzing.
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
McNamara.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Simpson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We need a motion, do we need a motion for submission of the grant?
No, it's already submitted.
Oh, it's already submitted, yeah, well, let's redo it.
No, I think we still
Well,
have to do
it
it.
was submitted based on time, but you still need to,
Okay, all right,
Okay.
so can I get a motion to submit,
To approve the submission of the grant.
to approve the submission of the grant?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Abbott.
Aye.
Benzing.
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
McNamara.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Simpson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, and this will bring us to our second public comment of the night. Oh, sorry.
Consent agenda.
Yep, consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 10th?
So moved.
Support.
Roll call. Abbott.
Aye.
Benzing.
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
McNamara.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Simpson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Now we move to the second public comment tonight. If you have anything to, you'd like to comment about, please limit it to 3 minutes and please state your name. Okay. Any board member discussion or comments at all?
I have a question. There, in our update, you mentioned a bond that's expiring in 2020. What is that you were talking about?
So we have to, because of the bond situation of what's happening in 2020, it'll create a shortfall in the district by about $2 million. So we need to discuss how we're gonna make up that shortfall. We need to begin that process in May of this year. At this point in time, we're still collecting all the facts and possibilities that we have in terms of where could we go.
What changed, or what,
Well, bond expires. I mean,
what
that's
was the bond for? Extra millage for,
Yeah, previously, I can't remember what the total amount was for. Nikki's not here in the audience today.
would we go back for another bond? I mean, has the bond been in place for a long time?
Yes, it has been, and it expires.
So we would go for a renewal?
I don't know that. There's multiple possibilities that are out there. What I'd like to do right now is to find out, first of all, what are the financial, really the operational financial requirements that we have as a district. So what's happened in the last 2 years is kind of muddled that picture. We need to understand what is it that we really need cash-wise to run our district on an annual basis. We're working on that right now. Once we figure that out really, then we can talk about, do we need to do something else in order to raise funds for the
Right.
district?
So we don't even know exactly what that bond was?
I don't know from the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't want him to speak, so I'd rather come back to you
Okay, yeah,
and give
sure.
you the bond information.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just know that Nikki and I sat down for the first time, we talked about it. She said, look, we have to start something in May of this year. We will have a budget shortfall of close to $2 million. That will impact us in 2020, and we will need to do something about that. So I said, okay, that's fine, then let's pull together all the information, let's sit down, let's have an internal meeting. I was kind of waiting also for that finance committee to be structured so that we could bring that into the finance committee and have that discussion there first. That's the purpose. That's why I'm not digging deeply into it, because it's not an immediate burning
Right,
fire
sure.
right in front of me.
Yeah, okay,
We
thanks.
have other fires that are
I,
burning right in front
I
of
just
me.
thought, I just asked.
And behind me, so let's focus on that. But my intention is to take that into the finance committee as the number one topic that we have to discuss. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
All right, any other comment or discussion? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Abbott.
Aye.
Benzing.
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
McNamara.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Simpson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
So he's super duper qualified, but we're gonna have to suspend the qualifications on the bylaws. It's cool. It's totally cool. It's a cool thing. It's American politics. It's small town.